Hey everyone, Roberto Johnson here, editor at Riffs and Rhymes, coming to you with the very first episode of our brand new video series, Record Talk. This has been a long time coming. In case you missed the announcement a few weeks ago, Record Talk is a new video series we're going to be doing on a monthly basis, essentially highlighting what we feel are important records in our music collection. One of our big goals this year was to share more elevated and engaging video content, and we thought it would be pretty cool to incorporate vinyl somehow. So that's how we wound up here, but again, super excited to share with you guys. And we hope you dig it. Now, without further ado, for today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite projects from this past decade in hip-hop and beyond, which is Danny Brown's 2011 album, XXX. I think it's a lot of people's favorite Danny Brown album, an underground classic in a sense, but let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so if you're unfamiliar with Danny Brown, Danny is a Detroit rapper who came up in the mid to late 2000s in the underground scene there. He was in a crew called Reservoir Dogs. His breakout came around 2010. He got a little notoriety for his debut album called The Hybrid, which introduced his charismatic persona and his really distinct vocal style. The following year, he dropped XXX, which was his real breakthrough. He gained a lot of recognition on a national scale and in a lot of underground hip-hop circles, and he sort of catapulted into turning into this underground phenom. Now, 2 years later, he came back with Old, another ambitious and bold double album that featured him rapping over a lot of weird production, a lot of electronic and EDM-influenced beats. That allowed him to basically tour the world, jump into the festival circuit, and continuously grow his audience. Now, he took a few years off after that, coming back with 2016's Atrocity Exhibition, which a lot of people consider the seminal Danny Brown album. To sum it up in short, it's basically a culmination of all the tumultuous years of Danny's partying, drug intake, his struggling to make it as a rapper, culminating onto this one album. And it's an absolute carnival ride, great project. And Danny again returned into the spotlight last year with his most recent album, You Know What I'm Saying. Dialed back the craziness a little bit, but still featured a lot of great rapping, comedy skit style rapping with a lot of humor over some pretty left field, old school hip hop production. Now, if you're familiar with Danny Brown and his body of work, I think a lot of his fans would say there's no question that his discography in the past decade puts him on par with just about anybody in terms of quality output. But in whatever way you look at his success, I think all roads lead back to XXX. So what is it about this album that's so great and unique? Let's start with the music palette and production style. So Danny's early projects, while solid, they were a little more generic. They featured some fun and quirky beats, but were pretty run-of-the-mill. Now, XXX was really his coming out party in terms of elevating his instrumental taste and choosing what kind of beats he wanted to rap over. Production credits on this album include Quelle Chris, Skywalker, Brandon Deshay, Paul White, a lot of whom would continue to collaborate with Danny later on into his career. Now, the general tone of this album, it's dark, it's ominous, but it's also very abrasive and brash, in your face. And at the same time, the beats had this infectious quality, still have this infectious quality that allowed Danny's little catchy hooks and refrains to stick with you long after they're gone.
Stop. Yeah, bitch, you know me. You're falling now. Stop. And I'm taking out your house, bitch. I'm showing now. Stop. What the fuck I got to laugh about? Stop. Stop. What the fuck I got to laugh about?
Now in 2011, these beats were really pushing the envelope. This was right after the bling era. Trap was big, but it still hadn't taken over the commercial landscape in the way that it has now. But again, this has the feel of a mixtape. It was sort of marketed as both a mixtape and an album. Regardless, the music is all over the place, and there's a really big variety of sounds here. There's songs that have more sparse and melodic production, like Radio Song and Bruiser Brigade. There's also a lot of weirder and warped out hypnotic beats, like on the songs Pac Blood and Outer Space. And then to combat that, there's a few beats that take a more somber and depressed and atmospheric tone, which really allowed Danny to get introspective, like on songs Party All the Time or DNA. But again, the overall tone and sound, very dark, in your face, and cutting edge as far as experimental and abstract hip hop goes. And as far as the lyrical makeup goes, I think when you're talking about Danny's rapping, whether you're listening to him for the first time or you're very familiar with him, the first point of discussion is almost always going to be his voice. Because you can't just look past it. Now, Danny primarily raps in two styles. So he has, his primary register is this high, yelpy, some people think frankly annoying voice that he often pairs with his more off-the-wall beats, his crazier songs. And then in contrast, he has a deeper, a little more run-of-the-mill tone. It's huskier. He uses it when he's being more reflective and introspective. I think they're both great, but they are certainly an acquired taste. Now, once you get past just the bearings of Danny's voice and how he sounds when he's rapping, I think you'll find that what he has to say has a lot of depth and substance. So XXX, it's no secret. I mean, this album is buried and immersed in graphic portrayals of substance abuse, poverty, and sex. It's really a lot to handle, but Danny writes about these things in a compelling way.
Bitch, I wanna party like Chris Farley. Shot a Hennessy, spike the with tamale. Tell mommy I'm sorry, God bless my soul. My life is so sublime, going out like Brad North. I got that Kurt Cobain type of mind frame, feeling like Keith Moon shrooms in my dressing room.
So again, Danny's lyrical substance, it's a lot, especially when you're first trying to get into him. But on top of that, his rapping style, past his voice, he's a champion of using different flows, and that's on display throughout the course of this whole album. He attacks whatever beat he has from all kinds of directions, and he does it with such veracity and conviction that it's truly compelling. Above all, though, I think Danny's presence as a rapper boils down to his ability to be an entertainer in multiple facets. I mean, just last year, Danny started his own comedy show, but even in 2011, if you would have said half a decade from now, Danny's going to be a comedian, it wouldn't have been that big of a surprise. I mean, yes, the subject matter is dark here, but it's also hilarious. I mean, he stacks lines on top of each other where he's talking about overdosing on drugs, and the next line, he's comparing a sexual encounter or a body part to Cool Ranch Doritos or Rainbow Skittles. I mean, his references are off the chart. Now, in the same vein, Danny's also known to be very musically literate. His taste is super wide-spanning. He's the type of guy who listens from anything to Black Sabbath to modern trap rappers like Draco the Ruler. So those things are on full display even nearly a decade ago, before Danny was truly a known commodity. One could tell just how well-versed he is in different styles of music. Now, we've touched on the themes of this album a little bit in terms of the stuff Danny's rapping about, but I think when you're going into the subject matter of XXX, you have to start with the title. XXX, it's obviously representative of the graphic nature of the content Danny's exploring on the album. XXX, it's dirty, it's abrasive, it's in your face, it's raunchy, but past that, it's also symbolic of where Danny was at this point in his life. XXX being the Roman numeral 30. Danny was literally 30 years old when he recorded and released this album. Just to put that into context, age is such a huge factor in terms of rappers blowing up and finding success these days. But that just puts into perspective how long he had been gutting it out in the underground and not really having much success to show for it. So it's clear Danny's exploring addiction, depression, and his own artistic struggle on a deep level. But what makes it so unique about this album is just how emotionally jarring his performances are. I mean, if you get into the lyrics, he's literally talking about if he doesn't make it with this project, he fails at life. He has literally nothing to fall back on at this point. That's how much he struggled. That's how much his music means to him. And he's literally laying his life out on the line in order to make it.
Nigga 30, so I don't think you heard me that the last 10 years I've been so fucking stressed. Tears in my eyes, let me get this off my chest. The thoughts of no success got a nigga chasing death. Doing all these drugs over OD at next XXX.
So when you listen to a song like 30 or a number of other cuts on this album, you can hear the emotion in Danny's voice and performance, but to put things in perspective, when this album came out, I think people and even Danny himself didn't know how much longer he was going to live. When he talks about drug abuse and immersing himself and being high all the time and being depressed because of it, he was turning to these mechanisms of coping because he had nothing else to fall back on, nothing else left really. That's what kind of a dark place he was in. And these are themes that would continue on later albums. But I think what this says at large about Danny Brown as an artist, his ability to convey emotion just speaks to his writing ability and, you know, the artistic effect to which these subjects are executed in his music. Above all, I think the reason XXX remains a landmark record for Danny Brown and contemporary hip-hop at large is that few projects in hip-hop and beyond have been able to tackle the perils and pitfalls of excess, you know, so heavily and so head-on, and just capture a state of such utter dejection as this album. And, you know, Danny did that really artistically. Obviously, it's a little concerning just how dark the album gets sometimes, but he does so in a way that was truly captivating. And, you know, I think the album still holds up. Danny's always made it his mission, you know, to make bodies of work that stand the test of time as opposed to just selling records and gaining fans and getting success that way. And I think he succeeded with XXX, and he would go on to do that again with his following works. So, you know, it's my hope that in 20, 30 years from now, Danny Brown will be a highly revered figure in the world of hip hop. And I think people will point back to XXX being, you know, one of the most important records for him, but also rap at large during this time. All right, guys, that wraps up our first episode of Record Talk. Really hope you dug it. I promise we'll get better at this as we keep on going. But in case you missed it in the intro, the next episode will probably be coming out sometime next month. We'll likely tease it and the project we'll be talking about a little bit. But again, thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, share. Your support is greatly appreciated and it means a lot to us. So be sure to tune in next month for the next one. And until then, I will catch you guys later. Peace.
I was born one day before St. Pat. I guess a nigga missed luck just like that. Henry Ford, not even 1 mile from Motown, explains all the soul that you hear in my sound.